March 7th, 1945. The western bank of the Rhine, near Remagen. The wind howling through the shattered pines of the Hutchen forest doesn't smell like pine needles or wet earth anymore. It smells of cordite, rotting leaves, and the metallic tang of unburied men. In a muddy foxhole, half filled with freezing rainwater, Obergefreiter Hans Weber tries to swallow a lump of grey paste. It is Kriegsbrat, war bread. But by this stage of the war, the name is a lie. There is barely any wheat in it. It is a brick of rye husks, potatoes, and sawdust, baked weeks ago and frozen solid. It scrapes against the roof of his mouth like sandpaper. Weber, a 20-year-old veteran who looks 40, forces it down with a mouthful of dirty water from his canteen. His stomach cramps immediately, a violent protest against the filler material intended to trick the body into feeling full. Around him, the remnants of the 15th Army are disintegrating. They are ghosts in field grey, their uniforms hanging loosely off skeletal frames. They have no fuel for their panthers. They have no shells for their mortars. But worst of all, they have no food. The supply lines from Berlin were severed weeks ago by Allied fighter bombers that prowl the sky like hawks, strafing anything that moves on a German road. "Keep your head down," whispers the soldier next to him, a boy named Elias who was drafted only 3 weeks ago. Elias is trembling, not just from the cold, but from the caloric deficit that makes the brain foggy and the limbs heavy as lead. "Do you hear them?" Weber nods slowly. He hears them. Across the valley, less than 400 yards away, the American lines are buzzing. It isn't the sound of screaming Stukas or Nebelwerfer rockets that terrifies the Germans now. It is the sound of engines. Thousands of them. The low, confident rumble of GMC Deuce and a half trucks, Jeeps and Shermans. The Americans never seem to turn their engines off. They have so much gasoline, they can afford to let their vehicles idle just to run the heaters. Weber peeks over the rim of the foxhole, adjusting his helmet. Through the mist, he sees the silhouette of the American forward operating base. It looks less like a military encampment and more like a bustling factory town. Electric lights flicker, they have generators. Smoke rises from chimneys, they have coal. And then the wind shifts. It blows from the west, rolling down the hillside, across the minefields and the barbed wire, carrying a scent so alien, so forgotten, that Weber initially thinks he is hallucinating. It is the smell of yeast, the sweet, warm, undeniable aroma of baking dough. Elias sniffs the air, his eyes widening in the gloom. "Hans," he rasps, his voice cracking. Is that a bakery?" Weber shakes his head, gripping his Morser rifle tighter, his knuckles white. "Impossible," he mutters. "No army bakes fresh bread on the front line. It's a trick, a hallucination." But the smell persists. It is rich and buttery, cutting through the stench of death. It triggers a primal response in the starving men. Their mouths water painfully. In the German army, bread is baked in industrial centers far behind the lines, dried into hardtack, and shipped in rail cars. By the time it reaches the front, it is rock hard. The idea that the enemy is baking here, within rifle range of the Wehrmacht, is strategically offensive. "I'm going to look," Elias says, pushing himself up. "Stay down, you idiot," Weber hisses, grabbing the boy's tunic. "I need to know, Hans. I need to know if it's real." Before Weber can stop him, the hunger overrides the boy's discipline. Elias crawls out of the foxhole, inching forward through the mud toward a ridgeline that overlooks the American depot. Weber curses under his breath, slings his rifle, and follows. If the boy gets spotted, the American heavy machine guns will turn this sector into a meat grinder. They crawl for 10 minutes, elbows sinking into the freezing slush, until they reach a cluster of fallen logs. From here, they have a clear view of the American rear echelon. What they see defies their understanding of warfare. Down in the valley, a massive canvas tent has been erected with a stovepipe jutting from the center. Parked next to it is a dedicated truck, a mobile field kitchen. American soldiers in clean, thick wool coats are lined up, holding metal mess trays. They aren't huddling in fear. They are talking, smoking cigarettes. Entire cigarettes, not the desperate stubs the Germans trade like gold currency. And there, at the front of the line, a cook is using a long wooden paddle to pull loaves from a field oven. They aren't the black, dense loaves of the fatherland. They are white, pure, snowy white bread. The steam rises off them in the cold morning air, a visible pillar of luxury. The cook slices a loaf, the crust cracking audibly, and drops 2 thick, fluffy slices onto a soldier's tray, ladling a generous helping of meat stew over it. Weber watches through his binoculars, his breath caught in his throat. He zooms in. He sees the texture of the bread. It's soft. It squishes under the weight of the ladle. White bread, Elias whispers, tears actually welling in his eyes. They eat white bread like it's cake, every day. Weber lowers the binoculars. He looks at the grey, sawdust-filled brick in his own pocket. He looks at the rusted bolt of his rifle. He looks at the massive column of American trucks stretching back to the horizon, bringing more flour, more sugar, more meat, more ammunition. At that moment, something breaks inside the Oberjeffreiter. It isn't his courage. It isn't his loyalty to his unit. It is his suspension of disbelief. The Nazi propaganda machine had told them the Americans were weak, that their supply lines were overextended, that U-boats were starving the Atlantic. But the white bread tells the truth. The bread says that the Americans are not just winning. They are fighting a war of such industrial excess that they can afford to treat their infantrymen like kings, while the master race eats wood shavings in the mud. They have won, Weber says softly. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. Elias, look at that. They aren't just fighting us, they are ignoring us. Elias turns to him, his face pale and gaunt. What do we do, Hans? Weber looks back at the warm, steaming tent. He looks at the grey misery of their own lines. He realizes that dying for the Reich today won't change the outcome of the war. It will only mean he never tastes that bread. We wait for dark, Weber says, his voice trembling with a decision that is technically treason, but feels like survival. And then we go to dinner. The darkness between the lines is not empty. It is heavy, suffocating, and alive with the potential for sudden violence. Weber and Elias strip their webbing. They leave their Morser rifles in the mud, the bolts removed and thrown into the brush. A soldier without a rifle is a deserter. A soldier with a rifle is a target. They keep their helmets on, unbuckled, creating the silhouette of men who are not looking for a fight. White cloth, Weber whispers. Elias fumbles in his tunic and pulls out a stained undershirt. It isn't white. Nothing in the German army is truly white anymore, but it is pale enough to catch the moonlight. He ties it to a fallen branch. Stay 5 paces behind me, Weber commands, his voice barely a breath. If they shoot me, you drop and crawl back. Do not hesitate. They step out of the tree line. The mud sucks at their jackboots with a wet, slurping sound that seems deafening in the silence. Every snap of a twig sounds like a gunshot. Behind them, somewhere in the blackness of the forest, are the Feldgendarmerie, the chained dogs of the military police. If they are spotted from behind, they will be hanged from the nearest tree with placards around their necks reading traitor. But the pull of the bakery is stronger than the fear of the hangman. They navigate through a gap in the minefield Weber memorized days ago. The wind is still blowing from the American lines, and even here, amidst the smell of wet iron and decay, the faint, yeasty aroma lingers like a siren song. Suddenly, a pop echoes overhead. A parachute flare hisses into existence, bathing the valley in a stark, magnesium-white light. Freeze, Weber hisses, They stand like statues in the open field, their shadows stretching long and distorted against the cratered earth. For 10 agonizing seconds, they are exposed. If an American machine gunner is bored or jumpy, they are dead. The flare dies, sizzling out as it hits the wet ground. The darkness rushes back in, more intense than before. Move, now. They scramble up the final embankment. The sounds of the American camp are distinct now. American jazz music playing softly from a radio. The clatter of parts. The low murmur of voices speaking English. It sounds dangerously casual. Halt, who goes there? The challenge comes from the darkness, sharp and guttural. An American sentry. Don't shoot. Weber screams in broken English, his hands shooting up so fast he nearly dislocates a shoulder. Nicht schießen, we surrender, we come, for bread. There is a pause. The metallic clack-clack of an M1 Garand safety being disengaged freezes the blood in Weber's veins. Come forward slowly, hands on your heads. Weber steps into the pool of light cast by a perimeter floodlamp. He squints, blinded. A tall American GI steps out from behind a sandbag wall, his rifle leveled at Weber's chest. The American looks impassably healthy. His cheeks are shaved. His uniform is thick wool, clean and free of patches. He is chewing gum. The American looks at Weber, then at the terrified Elias shaking behind him. He lowers the rifle slightly, looking confused. Just 2 of you, the GI asks. Yes, Weber nods frantically. Hungry, we are hungry. The GI spits his gum into the mud and shakes his head, letting out a short, disbelief-filled laugh. He calls over his shoulder. Sarge, got 2 more Jerrys coming in, look like skeletons. He waves the barrel of his rifle toward the interior of the camp. All right, Fritz, move it. Pow cage is that way. Don't try anything funny or I'll fill you full of lead. As they are marched past the sandbags, Weber looks to his left. He sees a stack of crates labeled motor oil. Next to it, a stack of crates labeled spam. Next to that, a mountain of jerry cans. The sheer carelessness of the storage stuns him. In the Wehrmacht, every drop of fuel is guarded by an officer. Here it sits in the open, unguarded, because there is simply too much of it to steal. They are led not to a dungeon, but to a wire-fenced enclosure near the center of the camp. And there, just 20 yards away, is the source of the smell. The field kitchen. The sensory overload is almost enough to make Elias faint. The American camp is a city of light and noise. Generators hum rhythmically. Trucks rumble past, their headlights on, ignoring the threat of Luftwaffe night fighters, because the Luftwaffe simply doesn't exist anymore. Weber and Elias are patted down by a bored MP who takes their knives and belt buckles. They are shoved into a holding pen with a dozen other German prisoners. The others are slumped against the wire, defeated, their eyes hollow. But Weber stands at the fence, gripping the wire mesh. He is staring at the mess tent. A cook, a burly man with a white apron over his fatigues, steps out the back of the tent to dump a bucket of potato peelings. He pauses, seeing Weber staring at him. The cook wipes his hands on a rag, looks at the starving German, and then looks at the tray of cooling bread sitting on a crate next to him. It is standard issue U.S. Army white bread. Industrial, mass-produced, fortified with vitamins. To the American, it is the most boring thing on the menu. To Weber, it is the holy grail. The cook picks up a loaf. He walks over to the wire. The MP starts to object. Hey, cookie, don't feed the animals, but the cook waves him off. Look at 'em, Sal. They look like they haven't eaten in a month. The cook breaks the loaf in half. The crumb is pillowy, stark white, contrasting against the cook's grease-stained hands. He pushes the halves through the chain-link fence. Weber's hands tremble as he takes the bread. It is warm. The heat seeps into his frozen fingers, shocking his nervous system. He turns to Elias and hands him a piece. "Eat," Weber whispers. He lifts the bread to his nose. It smells of safety. It smells of a country that hasn't had its wheat fields burned, its railways bombed, its horses eaten. He takes a bite. It is soft. It requires no chewing. It dissolves on his tongue, sweet and airy. It is nothing like the sour, gritty brick he had in his pocket earlier. This is bread that was grown on the vast plains of Kansas, harvested by combines, milled in massive factories, shipped by train to the coast, carried across the Atlantic on a Liberty ship, trucked across France, and baked in a mobile oven powered by Texas oil. Elias is weeping as he eats. Silent, racking sobs shake his thin shoulders. "It's so soft, Hans, it's so soft." Weber swallows, and with that bite, the last vestige of his indoctrination dissolves. He looks around the camp. He sees a soldier opening a fresh pack of Lucky Strikes, taking one, and throwing the rest of the pack to a buddy. He sees a mechanic pouring half a canteen of fresh water onto a rag just to wipe grease off a wrench. He realizes that the German high command lied about everything. They said that Americans were soft, a mongrel race incapable of discipline. But you cannot fight this. You cannot fight a nation that can ship fresh white bread to a war zone. A German major, captured earlier that day, is sitting nearby, watching them eat. He looks at the bread in Weber's hand, then at the American tanks refueling nearby. "We never had a chance," the major mutters, his voice devoid of anger, left only with a hollow realization. "Look at them. They don't even know how rich they are." Weber finishes the bread. He licks the crumbs from his dirty fingers, savoring the sugar and the yeast. For the first time in 3 years, the gnawing pain in his stomach subsides, replaced by a heavy, lethargic comfort. He slides down the fence to sit in the mud next to Elias. The war is over for them. The 1,000-year Reich has been defeated not by a wonder weapon or a brilliant tactical maneuver, but by a slice of wonder bread. "Hans?" Elias asks, wiping his eyes. "Yes." Do you think we can get more tomorrow?" Weber closes his eyes, listening to the hum of the American generators. "Yes, Elias," he says softly. "I think the Americans have enough bread to feed the whole world." The logistics of victory. The story of Hans Weber is not unique. By 1945, thousands of German soldiers were surrendering not just to save their lives, but to escape the medieval conditions of their own collapsing infrastructure. While Germany was resorting to horse-drawn carts and bread made of sawdust, the United States had built a bridge of ships across the Atlantic. The U.S. Army didn't just bring guns, they brought the American standard of living to the battlefield. They brought ice cream barges to the Pacific. They brought chocolate cake to the Ardennes. And they brought fresh, white bread to the Rhine. For the German soldier, witnessing this abundance was the final psychological blow. It was the moment they realized that no amount of courage, fanaticism, or tactical brilliance could overcome a nation that treated logistics as an art form. The Wehrmacht ran out of fuel, ammunition, and food. The Americans never even ran out of dessert.